Hi YouTubers, how are you? I thought I'd do a vlog on Brexit as it stands at the moment because I haven't done one for a while, so I thought I'd do one. And basically, I'm not going to treat you as though you're stupid and go through all the shenanigans that have happened since I last did a vlog on Brexit, which is going back a bit. So I'm not going to go over all that. I'm just going to take it from how it is at the moment. So Theresa May's plan, as we all know, has been voted down. Jeremy Corbyn's vote of no confidence, he didn't win that. The Tories won it by 19 votes. So the government survived by 19 votes, basically thanks to the DUP mainly. And we are now in a situation where Theresa May is reaching across the aisle to the backbenchers and the opposition parties to rally around and to come forward with their ideas on where we take Brexit now. Now, there's a lot of people calling for a people's vote. The Prime Minister is dead against that idea. She thinks the people's vote was held back in 2016 and that we don't need another vote. The decision has been made and there's no point having a general election when the original decision hasn't even been implemented yet. But a lot of people are saying, oh, but we know better now. And some people are pointing to opinion polls saying that they've shifted and that there's more support for Remain, although when you actually look at the opinion polls, they're very narrow and they're very similar to where they were that around this time back in 2016 in the build up to a vote of some description. And the opinion polls were very close, and as we all know, Leave won, which was not predicted. Everybody thought Remain was going to win. So there's no guarantee that a people's vote, as they're calling it, wouldn't be lost again by the Remainers and the Leave people win again. What do we do if that does happen? If there is a people's vote and Leave wins again? If Leave wins with a less of a majority than it did last time, say 50.5% or 51% or 50.1% or whatever, lower than 52%, that will encourage people to call for another referendum, and we'll keep on having referendums until some people feel, with the powers that be in Europe, will get the decision right. That's what some people see it. My personal opinion is it's a shit mess. This whole thing is a complete balls up from start to finish. I am ashamed to be British. My country has descended into racism, backbiting, useless politicians, intolerance, bigotry and all the rest of it. Trump and Brexit seems to have unleashed a wave of stuff that is really unpleasant, and it's beginning to affect people, and people are beginning to get sick of being British because the opinions on the street are horrific. People are being challenged in the street. Racism is just spouted out at people. You've got these so-called yellow shirts, British yellow shirts, which are just fascists, really. They're just racist, bigoted fascists going around attacking journalists who don't share their views and trying to silence them. And so we don't need any of that. We don't need any of that. You've got right-wing people turning up to left-wing meetings and causing ruckuses. You've got trade union demonstrations taking place and pickets, and then right-wingers turning up and disrupting the pickets and the demonstrations. I mean, it's getting out. It's like Nazi Germany in the 30s, in the 20s with the brown shirts, the SA and the communists. It's just getting ridiculous, and you're not hearing about it in the mainstream media. You only hear a brief bit. So this country has descended into all sorts of absolute shithole. It's horrible. I hate it. But this is where we find ourselves, and we've got a government that can't organise a piss up in a pub. Basically, they can't get their act together. They should have. Now Theresa May is doing this across the benches approach to get a consensus in the House of Commons. She should have done that in the first place when she was elected Prime Minister and she went into the negotiations. She should have carried the Commons with her. There should have been some sort of unity in the Commons to get the deal that everybody wanted after the referendum. Once we knew people on the whole wanted to leave, we should have gone for that, and we should have tackled how we were going to achieve it and then gone into the negotiations, not give up on all our red lines and just go into the negotiations piecemeal. And the complete mess that's turned into. Theresa May's deal was horrible. It would have left us, like a lot of people said, a vassal state. We would have been sort of in the European Union, but we would have had no say in the laws or governing structure of the Union itself. And that's no place to be. We'd have been worse off. We'd have been more under or people would like to put it that way, we've been more under the heel of the European Union and forced to abide by their rules and regulations, and we wouldn't have been able to make trade negotiations. And a lot of people who didn't vote on racist terms voted so that we could have trade deals. That was one of the factors in the referendum, and that's all gone. Now, my main concern at the moment with Theresa May reaching across the aisles is Jeremy Corbyn's attitude. Now, I like Jeremy Corbyn. He's a progressive politician, and I voted for him in the last general election. But he's not making any attempts to go with Theresa May and negotiate a way through. He's sticking to the customs arrangement, a new Labour customs arrangement, and an end to no deal, and a government caveat that no deal would not be attempted, or he's not going to go into negotiations. That's not consensus politics. That's not getting around the table. That's not reaching across the aisles. That's not backbenchers cross-benching. That's just Jeremy Corbyn thumbing his nose at the Tories because he doesn't particularly like them and he doesn't feel like he needs to work with them. Now, I can understand why he's doing it, but it's the wrong way to do it. He should be reaching out across the aisle to Theresa May and calling her bluff and saying, yes, we'll work with you. We'll come to some sort of arrangement and we'll get a deal on the table. That's what he should be doing, but he's not. He's being intransigent, and I sort of understand why. This is Tories. You don't deal with the Tories. And if anything knows about the Integrity Initiative and the stuff, if you follow stuff online on YouTube, you'll know about it. Gordon Dimmock talks a lot about it. So you've got that going on. You can see how Jeremy Corbyn thinks, well, you've done nothing but smear me since day one. Why should I work with you? But he's got to be more of a pragmatic politician, I think. He needs to reach across the aisles and really work with Theresa May and the rest of the Commons to come to some sort of consensus so we can find a way through the impasse that is Brexit at the moment. Otherwise, I think there'll be a suspension of Article 50, and then although cabinet ministers and MPs are being told it'll take a year for another referendum to be held, I think some politicians in the Commons will push for another referendum. I'm a bit dubious about another referendum, regardless of how I voted in the referendum, simply because a lot of people will see it as the establishment and the powers that be in Europe telling Britain, you got the first vote wrong, you got the decision in the last vote wrong, vote again, like they did with Ireland, like they did with Holland. Regardless of the reasons around why these things were done, they did make those two countries re-vote again in their referendums until they got the right decision for the EU. And that's what it feels like to some people is happening here in Britain. We're being told you got the decision wrong last time, you've got to vote again. It's complicated to say because some people say, oh yes, but we're more enlightened now, we know more. But do we? People's opinions haven't really shifted much. My friends' opinions haven't shifted, whether they voted to remain or leave. Their opinions haven't shifted. I know no one who's changed their mind on the referendum that I know who voted. I don't know any opinion polls which is clearly showing that Remain would win. It's still narrow. It's only like 3-4 points in it, so it's still narrow, as I said, like it was at that time before the 2016 referendum. So it's difficult to see what could be achieved by another referendum other than just dividing the country for more. And if it was a Remain vote, how many people would feel disenfranchised at their politicians for not implementing the decision in the first place and having a second referendum? And then what would have been the point of going through it all in the first place if we've then all voted to remain? It would have been a pointless exercise. We would have torn the country apart, divided ourselves and all the rest of it for nothing. And then what will happen? A large section of the electorate won't bother voting anymore because they won't see any point in it. The people who came out in the referendum to vote for the very first time, or for the first time in ages, who had the opinion that voting never changed anything, will be made to be correct in their initial assessment, and so they won't vote again. And you'll just have a small group of people who will be voting in referendums and general elections in the future, because most people in the country, especially if you voted leave, will think it was a waste of time, and their opinion wasn't listened to, and in the end it just became a Remain vote, and we had the referendum, and we all went back to being in the European Union. And then what will leave us if we're in the European Union? A country, a union where on the continent, the vast majority of the youth population don't want anything to do with the European Union because it's brought them nothing but misery, neoliberal order, and unemployment, and austerity. And they don't like it, they hate it, but in this country, the youth have a different opinion about the European Union. I do find it interesting, the difference of opinion. You've got the yellow shirts in France ripping the place apart, and one of their demands is Frexit on their manifesto. One of their demands is Frexit. That's not talked about, and that's not addressed in the media. And you don't hear the media saying, well, they also want Frexit, they want some form of Brexit, they're opposed to the European Union. That's not talked about. It's just said, oh, they're complaining about austerity, they're complaining about Macron. It's a lot more than that. So when we look across the English Channel into Europe, we see a Europe which is divided amongst some of the countries like Hungary and Poland, and also divided amongst the populations, especially in the southern region of the EU, like Italy, Spain, and Greece. And so you have this disenfranchisement, and there's no guarantee that the European Union is going to survive this. It could fall, for all we know. It might not survive another economic crash. It might not survive the turmoil that is breaking out in parts of the European Union. The European Union's future is not guaranteed. If we rejoin, will we have to give up the pound? Will we have to sign over more sovereignty? Would in 10 years' time there be another treaty change? Would some people feel if they voted to remain, they'd regret it in a few years' time? There's all this. But then if we voted to leave, what would be the outcome there? No one really knows. The no deal, WTO rules, sounds straightforward and all the rest of it, but we're told by the powers that be that it'll be a complete disaster, and we're stockpiling food and nothing will get into the ports, and there'll be jams everywhere. And it's difficult to know what to believe because we've never done this before. We don't know. We've been in the European Union for, I think it's over 40 years now. And so a lot of people, especially my age, have known nothing else. So when people voted for this change, it was a bit of a leap in the dark. They knew what they didn't want, but they weren't quite sure what they did want. They had some caveats, some things that they wanted out of it, like free trade, all the racist crap about immigration and all that. If you voted, I've said this in another vlog, if you voted to stop immigration into this country, you've got no right to vote. You're a racist bastard. We need immigration. Every country needs immigration. This country was built on immigration ever since the Celts came across the Channel and settled here after they left Rome in all that time ago back in the BC era. And they settled in Britain, and then the Romans came, and then the Saxons came, and then the Normans came, and the Jutes, and the Danes, and the Vikings. And then after that, we've had the immigration from across the world because the empire came home. If you're voting against, if your sole purpose to vote in the Brexit referendum was on the grounds of racism, you are narrow-minded and you need to sit down and learn a bit about history. It's the same thing that's going on in America. America is a nation built on immigration. The white population doesn't belong in America. The native population of America is the Aboriginal population of America. Everybody else are migrants, going back since the Pilgrim Fathers. So I don't know why white America feels that they're the native population of America. They're just deluding themselves. So back to Brexit, where do we go from here? I've got no answers. There's things I'd like to see. There's things I hope for. But I don't think our politicians have got a clue, because they never thought we'd vote for leave. They never thought this country would vote to leave. And when people say it was a narrow vote, it was only by 2%, 2%. Yes, but the difference between the Remain vote and the Leave vote is an additional over 1 million votes. There's 1 million extra people voted to leave than Remain. You can't just discredit over 1 million people that voted to leave to the ones who voted to remain. That it may be only 2% on paper as a percentage, but it's a lot of votes. It's a lot of human beings that voted to leave, regardless of their reasons. I don't know what to do. Part of me thinks, well, maybe we'll have another referendum and then we'll just get out of it and we'll all put it down to a complete pointless waste of time. Another part of me thinks, no, we can't do that because we've had a people's vote and we need to implement it first. And this is a democracy. We need to believe in democracy. But then other people say, yes, but we may have changed our minds, so let's have another referendum. That's democracy. Well, fine. After we've had another referendum on Europe, let's have another referendum in Scotland on independence for Scotland. That's the same argument there, but you don't hear anybody saying anything about that. And also, after the Welsh elections for the Assembly back in 1997, was it 97 or 90? Yeah, 97. The Welsh Assembly was only voted in narrowly by 51%, but you never heard anybody saying we'll have another referendum there. Well, we need to have another referendum there to make sure Wales still wants an assembly. No, everybody went ahead with it because it was a majority vote. So you can see all through political stuff in the last modern era that there are contradictions to what's going on now. And it's just annoying me because I'm a Democrat. Whether I like the referendum vote or not, people voted to leave on the whole, and that needs, for the sake of democracy, it needs to be respected regardless of how angry it makes you feel. Now, there's no guarantee that we won't have another referendum in 10, 15, 20 years. If we ever do Brexit and it's a complete failure and the country is in utter turmoil for the next half a decade, we'll probably have a referendum in half a decade's time, in 5 years' time. If it really goes tits up. But we need to be clear what we're going to do, and I don't think the politicians are. They've got no plan to know what to do. The establishment doesn't want Britain to leave the European Union. It's not in the plans of the neoliberal order. The neoliberal order is free markets, capitalism, and deregulation, and that's what parts of the EU are all about. And it's about austerity after the great crash. So it's hard to see how you can get out of it when you have the main bulk of the establishment, the media, the bulk of the media, don't forget the newspapers, the bulk of the radio, TV media, some newspapers, and politicians, the majority of the commons and business people and corporatists who all want us to stay in the European Union, and they all don't want us to leave. And then you've got these people that want us to leave, and then they fear people like Boris Johnson and Rees-Mogg because they don't understand they don't know what policies they have for this country. I know what they want. They want to turn us into a Singapore, a low pay, low tax economy where we compete with Japanese workers for wages on their levels, and we have deregulations in our health and safety and our food and agriculture and stuff like that to boost the neoliberal order and to boost the capitalist state. And I just think I don't want that either. So you can't really support either side of the Brexit argument because they're all some form of the establishment, and what they want for you is not in your interests. It is not in your interests. And it is being led by the Tories. The fuck up in this whole Brexit debacle is done by the Tories. And the fucking bastards who want us to get out, who are nothing more than a bunch of right-wing, homophobic, xenophobic gits, are basically saying, oh, well, we know what's best for you. And they don't have your best interest at heart either. So we're in confusion. Some people want a referendum again. Some people want us to implement Brexit. Some people want to go out on a no deal, which is the clean break that most people thought they were voting for in the referendum anyway. And so you have this paralyzing situation where the country is just stuck, arguing with itself, fighting with itself, turning in on itself, and not having a clear plan out of it. And I don't know how we get out of it. I can't see that having another referendum will ease the situation, other than maybe produce the Remain vote on the whole, and then everybody will just say, what was the point? And you'll have the animosity. And the other thing that bothers me, at the beginning I was talking about the right wing ganging up on left wing meetings and trade union meetings, like the SA did to the communists and the black shirts did in London during the 30s. And it's like, I forgot my train of thoughts gone. So it's like, I fear a stab in the back scenario where a large proportion, if there was a Remain vote, if we had another referendum and there was a Remain vote, I worry that the resentment would build up in a section of the population of this country that would feel like they had been stabbed in the back. What Hitler would always talk about in Nazi Germany before his rise to power, the stab in the back after the First World War. Although ours one would be, to them, to these people I'm talking about, would be the stab in the back against Brexit. We didn't have a Brexit, we had another referendum, we remained, it was a pointless waste of time, your vote was wasted. My fear is those people would hold resentment, and out of that may come individuals who rise to prominence. And that bothers me, because that is possible, especially the way our politics and people going to the extremes of politics in the world now is likely to head. It's either going to be a left-wing progressive future or it's going to be a right-wing fascist oligarchy. One of the two is going to happen, and that certain leaders, certain politicians, certain sort of like figureheads in society will rise to the fore on issues coming out of Brexit in this country. And it bothers me because I don't want the so-called stab in the back mentality to creep in to some people's thinking on this issue. So that's my fear. So whether we have another referendum or we don't, or we Brexit and we don't, this country needs a lot of work done to it to bring it together. And I can't see how it's going to happen. I can only see the situation getting worse. I don't see it getting better. I hope we can come together somehow. I don't know how. Maybe it's because on the whole the youth voted to remain and the elderly and the boomers voted to leave, that in a generation's time that animosity won't be there, because the majority of people who will be alive still will basically be Remain voters. So maybe people won't rise to the fore. That will be cancelled out. Maybe the people that would have risen to the fore would have to have been younger in their years. They're too old now. It's the other argument about, will people take to the streets and riot if there's no Brexit? Most of the people who voted for Brexit are boomers. They're too busy worrying about their hearing aids and their back problems and their Zimmer frames and all the rest of it to get out onto the streets and start chucking Molotov cocktails. And I'd be surprised to see anything kicking off in London big style like there was in the riots in 2011, simply because London is a Remain city. So the vast majority of people in London voted to Remain. So they're not going to take to the streets to riot if there is another referendum and Remain wins. It's all weird. I thought I'd do this vlog. It's a bit long. I'm up to 24 minutes at the moment, so I do apologise. If you stuck with me, thank you. I'll do some more on this as it's developing. I will try and keep you abreast of what's going on and my own personal opinions. But until now, let's hope for a better future than we've got at the moment, regardless of what happens. But it's a terrible state of affairs our country is in at the moment, and it doesn't make me proud to be British. I used to be proud to be British. There was a lot of stuff about Britain that there was our soft power and stuff like that there was to be proud of. But I'm not a great lover of my country at the moment. It hasn't got a lot to shout about in the world. It just looks like a bit of a basket case. Okay, YouTubers, I'll check you next time. See you later. Bye.